Welcome to TYT Nation. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. We're a little bit late here on the live stream, but we got a big show, amazing show for you guys. We'll be talking about some good news, progressive news, as well as, of course, going after the corruption among the Democrats and, of course, among the Trump administration, including a fun story on Kellyanne Conway. I think you'll enjoy that. Then, of course, like I said, we've got Tulsi Gabbard. We'll be talking about that. Got Roy Moore. We'll be talking North Korea. That's a very interesting story. We also have net neutrality, an update on that. And like I said, corruption in the Democratic Party relating to, of course, the banks. Wonderful. So all that stuff that we have lined up for today's show. So hopefully you guys stick around for the next hour. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Sharing is like the most important thing, so make sure that it gets out to everybody. Again, I do apologize for being late. We had some technical issues. My computer decided to freeze up during the middle of the editing process, which is wonderful. So, yeah, fun. I think I might have to think about replacing that hard drive. Anyway, and of course, okay, so anybody who like knows and kind of messes and tinkers with computers, I know that there's a few of you. Windows 7, man, pisses me off so bad. Because if you have a hard drive that fails on you, and you have to go and get a new hard drive and completely reinstall your system, they actually make you buy it again. They literally make you pay to reinstall Windows, even if you're doing it yourself. It drives me mad. The corporations, man. Disastrous. So that's my frustration. I cannot use a Mac. I'm sure some of you would be like, well, just use Mac then. No, I refuse. The only Apple product I use is my iPhone, and even that I get frustrated with. So I will pass on that. Anyway, yes. So I'm a PC guy. I'm so not millennial, even though I am a millennial. All right. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get to the news. Let's start out with a fun story. Let's start out with Kellyanne Conway breaking the law. Fun for everyone. So Kellyanne Conway may be in a little bit of trouble. Earlier, it's been reported, this is from CNN, that the U.S. Office of Special Counsel is saying that White House aide Kellyanne Conway has violated the Hatch Act. Oops. Now, what is the Hatch Act? Well, basically, it says that you cannot, and if you being a federal employee, cannot use their official capacity to try to impact an election, to try to, what's the word for it? Meddle in an election. I know, right? So now they have a couple of examples of this. Now, to prove their case, OC Special Counsel Harry Kerner pointed to a couple of Kellyanne Conway's TV appearances during the special election in Alabama, where there was somebody who was a pedophile, Roy Moore, or alleged pedophile, Roy Moore, running against a corporate Democrat, Doug Jones, whom we are already disappointed with. Disappointments for Jones aside, the choice is between milquetoast corporate Democrat and child molester. Alabama, look, the race was far, far too close for comfort. But Alabama said, well, that guy, Roy Moore, nah, I think we'll go for the milquetoast corporate Democrat this time because that guy, we're not going to touch that. Anyway, I'm going to avoid making any more terrible jokes or offensive jokes. Okay. Anyway, so their evidence is contained in two different appearances that Kellyanne Conway had done. Now, one of them was on Fox and Friends. Now, I want to show you that, and this was on November 20th. Now, she was introduced by the show's hosts as a counselor to President Trump, and she spoke from the grounds of the White House. Let me show you that interview. Let me show you what she said.
Doug Jones in Alabama, folks, don't be fooled. He'll be a vote against tax cuts.
So vote Roy Moore?
I'm telling you that we want the votes in the Senate to get this tax bill through.
The RNC has withdrawn support for Roy Moore. Mitch McConnell's withdrawn support. So is the Young Republicans withdrawn support.
And a lot of women.
Right, and you know what? I just want everybody to know Doug Jones. Nobody ever says his name, and they pretend that he's some kind of conservative Democrat in Alabama, and he's not.
You know what? I wish he was not a conservative Democrat. I actually wish he was a progressive, which he is clearly not. But anyway, just look at so far, the stuff that he's voted for. He's actually voting for deregulating the banks and gunning Dodd-Frank. Oh, what a wondrous progressive that you have there in Alabama. Again, all that stuff aside, here she is basically saying, we need Roy Moore to go and get these tax cuts. So basically sending a message to people, hey, you should support Roy Moore if you like the tax cuts. You know what I'm saying? Now, the OSC says Ms. Conway's introduction of Doug Jones into the interview happened to be unprompted, unresponsive to the question asked by the Fox and Friends host, and surprising given that she knew the four identified interview topics did not include Doug Jones. Again, she says, Doug Jones, nobody talks about him. I'm going to put him in right here. Unprompted, as I said. So, look, this didn't include Doug Jones, Roy Moore, or the Alabama Special Intention. Now, the OSC says her intentional partisan jabs against Doug Jones were made in her official capacity and meant to persuade voters on the race. Now, they use another example, and this is a New Day interview on December 6th where she's talking with Chris Cuomo. Let's take a look at that.
Let me ask you about this spin out of the White House that the president needs somebody who agrees with him and that he will endorse Roy Moore because that matters more than the accusations.
Oh, come on, that spin. Excuse me, that spin. You're not here to give your opinion. Here are the facts. When the president endorsed Luther Strange shot up in the polls tremendously by double digits. When the president endorsed Roy Moore, when he started to talk about Doug Jones, the opponent here, which you still don't want to talk about, but the president does, Roy Moore took a lead in the polls again. Why is that? Because the president himself came out and said he doesn't want a liberal in the Senate. He doesn't want a liberal Democrat in the Senate. He wants a reliable vote for taxes, for life.
You'd rather have an accused child molester than a Democrat?
The president also said something else that you don't seem to ever want to reflect, which is the president said Roy Moore has denied those allegations, and the president said you have to take that into account too. The only endorsement that's mattered in Alabama is the president's, because he came forward for Luther Strange in the primary, and Strange shot up in the polls. He came forward, again, the president is against Doug Jones, does not want a liberal Democrat to represent Alabama, is leaving it to the Alabama voters, and has said that he wants Roy Moore in the United States Senate.
Hey, look, man. Look, obviously the first one seems a little bit stronger of a way to influence voters, but that's Kellyanne Conway saying, "Hey, man, we need Roy Moore because if you want to get anything done, I mean, the president, he doesn't want a liberal Democrat, so you better vote for Roy Moore and not Doug Jones." That would appear to be using her official capacity to push for a certain candidate or to push against another certain candidate. Now, oh my God. So it seems fairly clear that yes, she was using her official capacity. So is she going to be punished about this or for this? Oh, you're going to be shocked to find out that no. The OSC referred Conway's violations to President Trump, and it's up to him whether or not Kellyanne Conway should be disciplined. Meaning that, nothing will ever happen. They're not going to punish Kellyanne Conway. You think Donald Trump is going to go after Kellyanne Conway? Again, one of the biggest supporters, somebody who is shameless enough to go out and lie and say anything the president wants, to make up alternative facts for the president. Do you think she's going to go out there, or you think she's going to get punished after going out there and shamelessly pushing for Roy Moore against Doug Jones? No, absolutely not. You're kidding. Look, we have no law and order in the White House anymore. No, see, the Trump administration, they flout the law, they flout ethics, they have all sorts of conflicts of interest. They won't even, like Donald Trump himself won't even divest from some of his business assets or interests. Come on, man. This entire administration is corrupt. They don't care about any of this. And you want to talk about the swamp. This is the swamp. They bathe in the swamp. And unfortunately, Kellyanne Conway is one of the biggest swamp monsters. Okay. Punish Kellyanne Conway. Come on. You think that's ever going to happen? Nobody's going to be held to account. Whatever. And if we get another corporate milquetoast Democrat, and this is something that frustrates me beyond frustration. If we get another president that's a corporate milquetoast Democrat, like Kamala Harris 2020, right? And no, that's not an endorsement. Guess what? They're going to look forward and not backward, just like President Obama. They're going to completely ignore all of this stuff. The flagrant ethical violations. No. We got to vote for progressives, for people who are going to actually be strong and actually hold politicians accountable when they break the law. Okay. That's enough on that. Moving on. Let's go to some good news. All right. Now, the Department of Homeland Security recently came out and said that 21 of our state's electoral systems had faced attempted intrusions during the 2016 election. Now, that's, of course, got corporate Democrats very, very concerned. Oh, my God, it's Russia. They're trying to hack our elections. They're trying to get into our elections. Did they actually penetrate our systems? Did they actually change any votes? No, there's no evidence of that. Nonetheless, it does highlight a weakness that we have in our electoral system, a weakness that has been there, that people have been talking about, progressives have been talking about for years, even before the 2016 election, 2012, 2010, all the way back into the mid 2000s. Okay, so we've had these, since we put these electronic voting machines, we've had a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, in response to these intrusions, Tulsi Gabbard says, you know what, it's great. You guys are going to sit there and talk about Russia. You know what I'm going to talk about? I'm going to talk about solutions. Let's take a look. Oh, I'm going to have to load up that video first. Hold. One of the problems with being late.
To stop a bad guy with a gun.
Hold. That's always the most weird part of the show.
The Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that 21 state electoral systems were targeted in the 2016 elections, revealing vulnerabilities and jeopardizing the integrity of our elections and our democracy as people lose confidence that their vote matters and that will actually and accurately be counted. In 2016, DEF CON, the world's largest hacking conference, revealed startling vulnerabilities in our elections infrastructure. We must take action now to safeguard our electoral infrastructure, ensure that each and every American vote is counted accurately. I'm introducing the Securing America's Elections Act, which will not only provide the American people with a voter-verified, reliable, and independent paper record of their votes that can be implemented before the 2018 elections, but it will also address the effectiveness and security of our electronic voting software. We must act now to secure our elections and renew our citizens' faith in the integrity of those elections.
Okay, so that's Tulsi Gabbard. Now, her bill, of course, would authorize emergency funding to empower every state to use voter-verified paper ballots to produce an auditable paper trail, beginning with the 2018 elections. And it also addresses the need to ensure safe and secure software is utilized in voting machines on Election Day. Now, I think this is overdue, and it's about goddamn time, because we have had vulnerabilities with our electoral system, as I said, stretching back decades. So, great. Let's actually do something about the vulnerabilities instead of complain about Russia, and instead of march towards armed conflict with another country. Nobody here wants that. Now, there are defense contractors that salivate at having a new Cold War, but I'm not at all interested. If you're a progressive like Tulsi, you're not at all interested. Okay? And so what we should do is we should defend ourselves at home. Now, if you're worried about electoral integrity, then you should be, like, again, these corporate Democrats, they come out and say, oh my God, the Russia, they're out to change our elections, they're out to destroy our elections. We need to do something about this. Okay, well then you should be supporting Tulsi's bill. You should co-sponsor this bill, this piece of legislation. You should help secure our elections. And by the way, this would actually do a lot to make sure that the Republicans can't also go in and hack our elections, which has been alleged. Now, in fact, as I said, or she mentioned during that speech, DEF CON, right? Now, DEF CON is the world's largest and longest running hacking conference. They found that hackers had breached every piece of election equipment, some in minutes. Even people with limited prior hacking knowledge and a few tools were able to manipulate the voting results. Most of those machines that are easily hackable are used in today's elections. So, and as I said, anybody with a scant bit of knowledge and some tools from hacking sites can change elections. Now, can you imagine what political party would actually want to take advantage of that? A political party that maybe gains more power when there are less people voting. Just saying. Or another political party that wants to keep outsiders from being able to take over the system from the inside. Could you think of any party that would want to do that? So, look, and I'm not saying that they actually would do that or have done that, but that's a possibility. which is why we need to actually protect our elections. And really, this goes beyond our voting machine, right? Now, let me give you a quote here before telling you what I would love to see in a real way to protect our elections. Now, this is from Brian Fox. This is a board member of the National Association of Voting Officials. He said, "We are pleased to see Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard leading the country towards safe and secure election systems. The open source software language in her legislation, in addition to the necessary paper ballot component, will give appropriate security direction to the nation's election officials. Congresswoman Gabbard is appreciated as a pioneer advocating the science of protecting our democracy." Now, one of the problems that I continue to point out is the fact that Republicans, that right-wing conservatives, holy shit, heard something from behind me. Oh my God. Anyway, that was weird. Okay. So one of the problems here is that Republicans are actually one of the biggest threats to our voting machine or our voting integrity. They want less people to vote. They want less people involved in democracy. So you don't think that they would actually go through and change voting results and do voter purges and things like that? No, they absolutely would. That's because they've done so before. All this stuff about voter ID, voter fraud, is a way to try to disenfranchise voters. Look, you have interstate cross-check, and you have things like trying to make sure that people are unable to register for vote, where you have less time to register for vote, where you actually have a lot of restrictions on who can be able to register to vote and how. That's all Republicans. That's not Russia. That's right-wing Republicans that want to make sure that people are unable to vote. So, yeah, we need to do something about that. Now, what do I call for? Well, I want to eliminate the Electoral College. Look, if you want to make sure that more people have their votes count, well, that's the most important thing. Get rid of the Electoral College. We should also do away with caucuses in favor of primaries. So that would be like maybe a controversial position, or at least according to Hillary supporters. Us Bernie Sanders supporters, us Bernie bros, we really love caucuses. No, actually, most of us favor primaries, even though we know Bernie Sanders did better in caucuses, or at least in caucus states. So, no, but primaries are more representative of the voter base than a caucus. And a caucus has a lot of challenges for, people to be able to show up at and actually be able to take part of. Now, also, we should do universal voter registration. We should have a voter holiday. We should end the voter ID laws, as I mentioned. We should also eliminate superdelegates. What we need to do is all those different things and actually try to make sure that more people go out to vote. And that is the problem, is that we don't have enough people voting. When elections are really close and when there is such a low voter turnout, there is more ability for, say, a foreign power or an opposite political party to be able to rig elections in their favor. And there are many different ways that you could say rig, by, of course, making sure that people are not registered, deregistering people from the polls, making sure that you close down certain voting booths in certain areas, creating more longer lines for people that may have to work that day or can't get to the polls in time because they're working two uniquely American jobs. There are structural barriers and physical barriers in place that prevent people from voting. We need to eliminate those barriers. We need to make it easier to vote. We need to make it better to vote. Now, some might say, well, if you want to make it really easy to vote, let's do online voting. But again, the problem with that is that you cannot verify the results. There is no paper trail. And so it's very insecure. And again, anything that's connected to the internet has a risk of hacking. So, again, that's why Gabbard has come out and said we need to protect our elections. We need to have that backup paper trail. And she's absolutely right when she advocates for that. So, and look, one more thing that I would love to add is ranked choice voting. I know that's a long shot at this point, but Maine is about ready to put in ranked choice voting. And if that can become a model throughout the different states, who knows, we could end up having that go federal. And that would allow us to be able to make our own choices without having to worry about the lesser of two evils argument, which is used by both parties to have an advantage. So, look, I just want to make voting more fair, easier to access, and make everybody's vote count. And so does Tulsi Gabbard, and so do you if you're a true progressive. Okay. I think I had too much coffee today. I think that's the problem. All right. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll be back. We got more stories, so stay right here. Just give me a minute. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. As I said, I am full of coffee, and so I'm ready to go. All right. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Very, very important if you share out the show. Helps out a lot. Sharing is caring and all that wonderful stuff. All right. Moving on. Nope, that's not what we're going to do. I have it somewhere. There we go. So I should have done that right after the story before. That's okay. I should have talked with my producer. Oh, right. That's me. All right. Let's have a quick one. Let's talk about Roy Moore. Roy Moore is still fighting the election in Alabama, and he is asking for money from his supporters. That's awesome. Now, in a Facebook post, the U.S. Senate candidate, or unsuccessful U.S. Senate candidate, said that he is running out of money thanks to his attorneys, and is talking about how his resources have been depleted, and he now needs your money because he's struggling to make ends meet. Cue the world's smallest violin for Mr. Roy Moore. In the post, he says, I have lawyers who want to help, but they are not without cost. And besides their fees, legal expenses could run over $100,000. I've had to establish a legal defense fund. Anything you give will be appreciated. Now, you might be wondering why he's raising a legal defense fund. It's because he is being sued by Lee Korfman. Now, Lee Korfman was the 14-year-old girl that Roy Moore had allegedly fondled when she was like I said, 14 years old, and he was 30 years old. And afterwards, of course, Roy Moore went out there and talked about how, nope, this is all lies. This is all terrible. She's a terrible person. Everything that she says is fake. She's a Democratic plant, despite the fact that she's a registered Republican. Basically, he went on to smear her. And now she's like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to sue your ass. And so she's suing for about, well, I don't know what she's suing for, actually. But he is aiming to raise about $250,000 in order to fight this defamation lawsuit by Lee Korfman. Now, she says in her lawsuit, all these statements by Mr. Moore are defamatory. Mr. Moore sexually abused Ms. Korfman in 1979 when she was 14, and he was in his early 30s. And Mr. Moore's denials of these facts are false, and his characterizations of Ms. Korfman and her motivations are untrue. So, look, that mischaracterization, of course, involved her being irresponsible, somebody who's not a good person, who's suing for basically fame and most importantly, in order to get a payoff. So, and look, one of the reasons that she did not come out with this information earlier, because that's always the question that's asked, is why didn't you come out with it earlier when you were younger? Well, number one, nobody would believe her because he was well known for this in the community for going after young women. That's true. But nonetheless, a lot of victims are very scared to speak up because there are people with power. And at that point, Roy Moore had a lot of power in that area. So that's one reason why she didn't speak up. The other is, of course, yes, she does have a little bit of a checkered past. At the same time, there are so many allegations against Roy Moore that it's very, very hard to discount all of them. Anyway, now, in an email to supporters in late January, Moore explained how his Senate run, plus these legal fees, have left him with, quote, very minimal resources, and his recent call for donations drew on the touchstones of his campaign, going after the establishment and appealing to Jesus. Now, let me read you some of that email, because this is awesome. The liberal media, in association with some who want to destroy our country, do not want my influence in the 2018 elections and are doing everything that they can to stop me. So who are those people that want to destroy our country, destroy America? It's the gays. Quote, gays, lesbians, and transgenders have joined forces with those who believe in abortion, sodomy, and destruction of all that we hold dear. Unless we stand together, we will lose our country. Oh, see, it's the sodomites problem. So they're the ones that went and created this issue. They're the ones who are attacking me. Oh my God, dude. Seriously. The gays, lesbians, and transgenders, oh my. They're out to go get Roy Moore. Oh. And he says, my resources have been depleted, and I've struggled to make ends meet, but I have not lost my faith in our God, who was our true source of strength, and will never leave or forsake us. Well, dude, your resources are depleted. It would seem to me that God, if he exists, has abandoned you. I mean, you're not doing very well. You are depleted. You are struggling to make ends meet. That is not the hallmarks of somebody who seems to be protected by the Almighty God. I'm just saying. Maybe he's got the whole God thing wrong. Maybe God's like, no, dude, I'm on the side of the transgenders and the gays here. I'm on the side of the sodomites, and you are not. Therefore, I am against you. Ridiculous, man. No, the problem is that he's a pedophile. He touched 14-year-old girls. He touched teen girls, nearly attempted to rape another. He's a creep around town, and all this time he's preaching family values. No, there are no family values here. His family values mean hitting on your daughter, hitting on your family, you know? So, this guy trying to use and appeal to God and all that stuff, it's absolutely ridiculous. But that is Roy Moore, and he is going to continue to fight because he is absolutely deluded. Okay. Moving on. I haven't talked about this yet. It's going to be interesting. Now, recently, President Trump had announced some tariffs, some protectionist tariffs to try to boost American industry. Now, these tariffs would be on aluminum and steel that is imported from other countries. Now, China has an issue with, of course, dumping steel into the United States. So, look, some of the people that are involved in our trade program are saying, hey, we should do some protectionist tariffs so that we can help our industry and you know, prevent that kind of dumping. Now, the problem is that when you start to do certain protectionist tariffs, I believe it's for 25% for steel and 10% for aluminum, although I might have the numbers mixed up on that. When you start to do those things, there's an eventual clapback that is going to happen. And the EU is actually looking at preparing to set their own set of tariffs on American goods. Now, I believe according to Bloomberg, the collection of European countries, according to, yes, Bloomberg, is targeting 2.8 billion euros, which is about $3.5 billion worth of American goods, with a 25% levy. Now, they would be placed on a range of consumer, agriculture, and steel products imported from the U.S., including motorcycles, denim jeans, and bourbon whiskey. Now, some of those things have Republicans really, really unhappy. Now, for example, Paul Ryan. Now, Paul Ryan is the Republican Speaker of the House. Now, he comes from the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is where Harley-Davidson is located. Now, look, does he take money from Harley-Davidson? I'm not entirely sure. Most likely. Now, earlier this week, Ryan said that he was very, very worried about the consequences of a trade war and urged Trump to drop his tariff proposal. That's actually one thing I actually kind of agree with Paul Ryan on. I think it's kind of dumb. And I'll give you the numbers on why. Now, other politicians feel the pressure. Bourbon hails from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's home state of Kentucky. And, of course, Mitch McConnell is not exactly happy about this either. And then, of course, you have Levi Strauss that's headquartered in Nancy Pelosi's district. Now, all these politicians probably get money from these respective businesses and industries. And they're like, no, don't do the tariffs, don't do the tariffs. But it's not just the politicians, of course, not just the companies, but it actually is the American consumers that'll end up getting hurt. Because, believe it or not, a trade war is not good for anybody. Now, according to the Trade Partnership, a consulting firm that researches international trade, they found that tariffs could cost the United States about 146,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. Another report estimated that the proposed tariffs, which act as a tax on imports, would help boost the steel and aluminum industries in America, but the increased cost for industries that make products using those metals would lead to overall job losses. The majority of those losses, according to the two people that did the study, Francois and Baumann, would come from low-paying industries. So, look, what you're going to end up doing is that Donald Trump, in doing these tariffs, which are ill-advised, and actually, according to reports, had come basically during a time when he was just very angry and pissed off and wanted to retaliate against something or somebody, would actually hurt the people that he swore to help during the election. Now, of course, that was all bullshit. He didn't care about poor people. He doesn't care about the consumers that'll end up being harmed. He actually cares more about himself. And so these people would end up getting crushed. Now it gets worse. Now, Europe may also expand the group of targeted American goods should Trump follow through on a related pledge to impose a 10% duty on foreign aluminum. Now, the list obtained by Bloomberg on Tuesday relates only to steel countermeasures. So, and look, it's not just these industries that are going to get impacted. It's by higher prices. It's also going to be related industries that will also lead to job losses, which will lead to less consumer spending, which will lead to this, which will lead to that. So here we go. We're going to end up losing a lot of jobs. We're going to end up losing a lot of jobs in related industries, and industries that, of course, use a lot of aluminum and steel. So it's not going to be good for the economy. Now, Christina Hooper, chief global market strategist at Invesco, talked to Bloomberg, and she said, these tariffs right now, thankfully they're just talk, but they have the potential to become quite inflammatory and impact economic growth. Tariffs beget more tariffs. It's like putting bacteria in a petri dish. It's going to continue to spread. Again, trade war, not a good idea. As opposed to what our president says, oh no, trade wars are easy to win and they're fantastic. No, they're not. There is a way that we can do fair trade. I'm not for free trade, I'm for fair trade. Now, there's a way that we can come up with a way to do fair trade to make sure that American industries and most importantly, consumers are not hurt by this. And that jobs are not outsourced. I would actually go after the companies themselves and make sure that, oh, if you want to go to other countries, then we're going to put a tariff on your imported goods, not the entire country's imported goods, but just that company. I don't know if you can actually do that, but that's something that I would look at doing. Make sure that if you go over there, we will tax you more on the goods that are coming in and not allow you to pass that off to the consumer. Again, I don't know how you can actually make that happen, but I don't know. There's a lot of people that are smarter than me that can figure that one out. But most importantly, we need to have a trade policy that discourages companies from going overseas, that isn't a race to the bottom for the people that are here, that are the workers. Because in all of these things, workers are always the ones that end up being hurt. Okay. Let's go to foreign policy. This next story is unbelievable. Better watch out. I'm going to be unbearable. Okay. North Korea might actually give up their nuclear weapons. I know what you're thinking, right? No, there's no way. Kim Jong-un is insane. He'll never give up his nuclear weapons. But wait a minute. There is a possibility. Generally, I do agree with that assessment, but there is a possibility. Let me give you the story here. This is from the New York Times. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has reportedly told South Korean envoys that he is willing to begin negotiations with the United States on abandoning its nuclear weapons, and that it would suspend all nuclear and missile tests while engaged in talks. If this is true, this is big. Oh man. Now they said that during the envoy's 2 days visit to Pyongyang, the North's capital, which ended on Tuesday, the two Koreas agreed to hold a summit meeting between Mr. Kim and President Moon Jae-in of South Korea on the country's border in late April. Now, this meeting, of course, would basically begin the talks of denuclearization in the area, which would be fantastic. Now, the statement said the North Korean side clearly stated its willingness to denuclearize. It made clear that it would have no reason to keep nuclear weapons if the military threat to the North was eliminated and its security guaranteed. Now, this brings me back to the idea of why North Korea has nuclear weapons in the first place, and why Iran was seeking nuclear weapons as well. It's to protect themselves from us. I know it's a weird mindset when you think about it, but put yourself in the shoes of another country, if you would. here you got America that loves to interfere in other countries. We interfere in elections. We overthrow dictators all the time. We went into Iraq. No reason to go into Iraq. They didn't attack us. We didn't like their leader, though. We didn't like Saddam Hussein. So we went in there in the pretense of freedom and weapons of mass destruction, and we overthrew a government that we had no real reason to overthrow. We just didn't like him. We have a tendency to get involved in other countries. So, knowing our track record of just going in and all of these countries had one thing in common. They didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have a way to deter America from going in all imperialist on them. Now North Korea has those weapons. Iran has those, is working towards those weapons. Well, not anymore, since we actually did make a deal with Iran. But nonetheless, if you have those weapons, that's a pretty big deterrent for America to not invade you. So it would make sense that this nation, which, look, barring all the other things, right? Because, you know, North Korea is a huge repressive regime. It's despicable what they're doing to their people, on and on and on. You couldn't have enough bad things to say about the ruling party in North Korea and Kim Jong-un. At the same time, it's not our job to go and invade and liberate every country. And that's the problem that I see with America's foreign policy. We see ourselves as the liberators of the world, but every country we end up touching gets worse. Again, Iraq's a great example. Libya is another great example. We topple the dictator, and then what? We end up creating a power vacuum without understanding the intricacies of different factions inside, and I'm speaking to Iraq specifically. We end up creating ISIS and Al-Qaeda hit the vacuum. They filled that vacuum that we created. In Afghanistan, is anything better in Afghanistan now? No, corruption is incredibly pervasive within the government of Afghanistan. The Taliban still exists. What are we doing there? What were we doing there? What did we go out to, what did we actually achieve in all this? I know what we achieved. We made some defense contractors extremely wealthy. That was the only thing that we have actually achieved in all of these different military adventures. So, yes, it would make sense, seeing America's track record, that a country would go, okay, let's nuclearize to make sure that we do not get invaded by America. That's the North Korean position. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm saying that it's understandable from their perspective. That said, I actually love this admission by North Korea saying, yeah, you know what? We are actually thinking about denuclearizing as long as we make sure that America is not going to invade us. And believe me, that is the last thing I want us to do. And I would hope that that's the last thing the American people want to do, because we are tired of endless war. We are tired of endless conflict. And we would like to avoid these conflicts. Now, if the statement, and I'm going back to the New York Times here, if the statement is corroborated by North Korea, it is the, I believe I already said that. Okay, so now let's go to President Trump's reaction. Oh no, oh boy. He said on Twitter, of course, possible progress being made in talks with North Korea. For the first time in many years, a serious effort is being made by all parties concerned. The world is watching and waiting. Maybe false hope, but the U.S. is ready to go hard in either direction. Now, at first I was like, did Trump write that tweet? And then at the end, it's like, oh yeah, he wrote it. No, we're ready to go hard. No, let's not go hard. I mean, let's go hard for peace. I'm all for that. And look, if we end up getting peace with North Korea under the Trump administration, I don't know how much he has to do with anything, but it would be a wonderful thing. It would be a wonderful achievement. Now, and I think it's because, honestly, the United States was not quite as involved. And that's, of course, look, again, that's another reason that we should not be the world's policeman and try to inject ourselves into all these different affairs. Because it was South Korea and North Korea that said, hey, you know what? Let's go and let's talk. Okay, let's open up some discussion, because America, look at what America's doing. They do not have our best interests at heart under this idiot moron of a president. So let's go and let's talk about this. And you know what? It might actually lead to some results. Now, there's just a problem of hopefully Trump doesn't go and fuck it up. Now, that's the thing. And look, we should be skeptical of North Korea. If you're saying that, oh, come on, Jeff, you're too trusting. He is Kim Jong-un. He's going to renege on this promise. Look, I get it. And I am skeptical. But if this happens, this could be a big win. But we should, of course, be cautious in dealing with Kim Jong-un. But also try to find some way to create a real lasting peace. Now, the article finally says, Washington remains deeply skeptical of any attempt by the South to improve ties with the North without progress on denuclearization. Although Mr. Moon wants inter-Korean dialogue, he has said that the two initiatives must move in parallel and has been urging the United States and North Korea to start negotiations on the nuclear program. So again, what we need to do is actually go in there with a bit of an open mind and make sure that we do what we can to try and negotiate in good faith. Now, there's a lot of people in the region, a lot of countries in the region that are also very skeptical. Japan, naturally very skeptical of North Korea, of course, and totally understand that. And there, again, other countries in the region. But we've got to at least try. If we can denuclearize North Korea and then watch them afterwards, of course, that would be a huge step in moving us back away from the precipice of nuclear war. And that would be a great thing. Okay. I'm very hopeful today. All right, moving on. I got plenty more stories for you guys. Now, there's a big update on the West Virginia teacher strike. It appears that the strike is over. And the teachers have won. Now, this is a little bit of a bittersweet victory. Now, I'm going to get to that, but first let's get to the good news. CNN is reporting that a deal has been reached to deliver a 5% pay raise for all state employees, including the striking teachers. Now, the deal, they say, is intended to end a teacher strike that has canceled 9 consecutive school days across the state. Now, Teachers Union Representative Christine Campbell told CNN that she anticipates school to be back in session on Wednesday if the bill is passed Tuesday in the House of Delegates and the Senate. Now, at a legislative conference committee meeting to resolve the issues between the two bills, because the House of Delegates and the Senate passed 2 different bills. So originally, I believe it was the House of Delegates only passed a 4% increase in pay, whereas the Senate passed a 5%, and that bill is unable to be reconciled. Now, this deal that is passed, if it's passed by both chambers, will give that 5%. Again, that would be wonderful if they could do that, and they could obviously put the teachers back to work. Now, Republican State Senator Craig Blair said that this new deal represents the largest pay raise in the history of West Virginia. Well, that's because we had an unprecedented statewide strike that we have never seen in West Virginia. In fact, 55 counties were shut down. Schools all across the state of West Virginia were effectively shut down for 9 days. That is the power of unions. That is the power of representation. That is the power of labor taking it upon themselves to go, that's it. We've had enough. We have had enough. We haven't gotten a raise in 4 years. Our health insurance rates continue to spiral out of control. And we are actually some of the lowest paid teachers in the country. they make on average about $33,000 a year. So, again, they ranked 48 out of 50 when it came to compensation. So, now, I said that this is bittersweet, right? Again, this is great. This shows the power of labor, and I encourage more states to do the same thing. However, Blair said the government will see a $20 million reduction in spending to come out of cuts to other services. That is general services and Medicaid. So since they are a Republican-controlled state, they did this not by raising taxes. They said no taxes. In fact, they're crowing about this. Oh, we were able to do this without cutting taxes. Well, what did you do? We cut other programs. We cut Medicaid. Oh, no, don't do that. Oh, for Christ's sakes, don't do that. This is Senate Majority Leader Ryan Fern's, who's a Republican. He said, with this agreement today to reduce spending in state government in order to give every single dollar available to our public employees, we've achieved the goal of being fiscally responsible while also getting a pay raise that will help our teachers get back into the classroom and our students back to school. So, here we go. Now, like, again, on the one hand, the teachers absolutely deserved this raise. And they fought for it, and they went for it, and they showed you what collective action can actually bring. On the other hand, now you've got a cut in Medicaid, which is disastrous. Now, Governor Jim Justice, who was a Democrat and is no longer a Democrat when it suited him, he became a Republican. He agreed to set up a task force to address the state health insurance program on March 13th. I don't know what's going to happen there. So, look, my question is, why can't we do both? Again, we live in the wealthiest nation in the world. And yet we cannot make sure that teachers get money that they need, that they deserve for teaching our students, and also to make sure to take care of the poor on Medicaid. I mean, what we do is, look, the Republicans have successfully pitted two sides against each other. All because they refuse to raise taxes on the wealthiest corporations and individuals in West Virginia. It's a disaster on that front. As much as I love the teachers that have fought for this, and they deserve their pay, and as much as I love the power of unions and how much they fought for, I now worry about what Republicans will take from the people that are on Medicaid. That money should have come from the wealthiest West Virginians. That should have come from the corporations. And this is Republicans, of course, robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is why we need progressive representation, so that they will actually be able to get the funding that they need without having to hurt the most vulnerable. Okay. So as I said, bittersweet. Moving on. Let's see. Let me save the best news for last here. And we will go to the bailout caucus. Prepare to get angry. The Republican-led Senate has just advanced a bill that would deregulate banks and make it even more likely for another financial collapse. Now, this legislation would be, it would roll back parts of Dodd-Frank, and by increasing the threshold at which banks are subject to stricter capital and planning requirements. So that's one of the protections that was put in by the Dodd-Frank reform bill. It's making it so that banks that are over $50 billion in assets were subject to certain rules, oversight rules, to make sure that they didn't make risky investments and things like that. Now, among the provisions inside this bill, according to Politico, banks would have easier mortgage regulations, that's smaller banks, and small is a relative term, It would also have new exemptions from tougher oversight for regional banks with $50 billion to $250 billion in assets, a directive to the Federal Reserve to tailor its rules for large banks, and relaxed capital and liquidity requirements for some of the nation's biggest financial institutions. Now, what does that mean? It means that some of the biggest banks in America are now free from increased oversight. That's not good. Now, some of the biggest Wall Street firms are already exempt from this, and yet the ones that are not, or the ones that will be soon exempt, if this passes, and it's very likely to pass, can still wreck the economy. Even if you have smaller banks, 4 banks that are worth $50 billion each, that is below that threshold, well now, if all of those fall, which is basically what we saw in 2008, a lot of smaller banks collapsing, that will still lead to a bigger collapse. That is the problem. Now, that's why the CBO issued a report earlier saying that this bill increases the chance of another bailout. Quote, CBO's estimate of the bill's budgetary effect is subject to considerable uncertainty, meaning they don't know exactly what's going to happen, in part because it depends on the probability in any year that a systematically important financial institution will fail. However, CBO estimates that the probability is small under current law and would be slightly greater under this new legislation. It is basically saying that if you pass this bill, it is more likely now than under current law that we will have a disastrous financial collapse that will end up leading to more bailouts for the banks. So that's not good. Now, Republicans are pushing this. This is a crapo bill. By the way, it's a crapo bill, and it's also the crapo bill because it was pushed by Republican Representative Mike Crapo. So now, and I'm sorry, that's Senator Crapo. Anyway, so the Republicans are on board, but, and you're not gonna enjoy this part, it also has bipartisan support, enough to actually clear a filibuster. 12 Democrats have decided we're actually going to support this bill. Now, who are they? You're not going to be shocked. You have Joe Donnelly, Heidi Heitkamp, North Dakota. By the way, she's being primaried. Justin Pyre, look him up. Dustin Pyre, sorry. Dustin Pyre, look him up. John Tester from, you have John Tester from Montana. You have Mark Warner from Virginia, Claire McCaskill from Missouri, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Tim Kaine from Virginia, Gary Peters from Michigan. You also have Michael Bennet from Colorado, Chris Coons from Delaware, Tom Carper from Delaware, and, of course, Senator Doug Jones. Aren't you glad you voted for Doug Jones? Still better than a pedophile, though. Now, those are the members of the bailout caucus that helped with this. Now, Mark Warner, of course, is one of the leaders on this bill. He told reporters, "We feel very good about getting this through this process." This bipartisan process of actually supporting and helping the banks. In fact, John Tester also chimed in. He said, quote, "I hope that our bipartisan work can rub off on the rest of Congress so we can break through the partisan gridlock that has plagued Washington for too long." Now, think about that, right? Whenever you hear the words bipartisan, you know that it's going to be bad. Hold on to your wallets, man. Watch out. The only time Republicans and Democrats can seem to get along is when they seem to want to help the banks. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? No, that's not weird at all. That's corruption. You know what they were going to take up? And The Intercept reported this last week. They said, Mitch McConnell said that instead of taking up a gun bill, a bill to do something about gun control, which killed 33 people, 33,000 people every day. We're going to do the crapo bill instead. You know why? Because we can get bipartisan support. We can get these corporate Democrats on board so we can pass this bill that is going to help the banks. Now, there's more. Joe Donnelly also said in a statement, quote, after years of bipartisan work to advance regulatory relief for the community banks and the credit unions across Indiana, I'm pleased that the full Senate will debate the legislative packages I negotiated. This legislation will make it easier for Hoosier families to gain access to mortgages and small businesses to access capital. And it also includes important new consumer protections, such as free credit freezes in response to the Equifax data breach. Yeah, but those things, they don't go far enough. Any protection that's in this bill does not go far enough. That's what Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's a big critic of this bill, Sherrod Brown, another big critic of this bill, and Bernie Sanders are all saying. This is not enough, and you're deregulating the banks that need to be regulated more. In fact, Bernie Sanders in a statement earlier called for the breaking up of these big banks. So he ain't done with this, man. Now, and by the way, Elizabeth Warren says she's going to actually try to add some consumer protection amendments. But of course, there's no guarantee that any of this consumer protection stuff is going to pass. Well, it's very, very likely that the deregulation of this bank will pass. They've got 67 votes. That's how much it passed the committee to get onto the floor. They have opened up debate. And very, very likely, we're going to end up making it even more likely for these banks to crash the economy and get bailed out again. We've already had to bail them out once. Where's our bailout? Now, there's one more piece of information here. Now, 9 out of the 12 Democrats supporting this bill also count the financial industry as either their biggest or second biggest donor. It is the corruption. And some members will also personally profit from this. And this is according to a new report by TYT Investigates. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, again, being primaried by Dustin Peyer, look him up, and her husband have nearly $1 million invested in two of the bill's biggest winners, JP Morgan Chase and Berkshire Hathaway, according to 2016 financial disclosure documents reviewed by TYT Investigates. For the senator, whose net worth is roughly about $4.5 million in 2015, according to an estimate by the Center of Responsive Politics, the JP Morgan and Berkshire Hathaway investments potentially account for a substantial portion of her and her husband's assets. Not only that, but the JP Morgan PAC also gave $5,000 to Heidi Heitkamp's leadership PAC, the Dakota Prairie PAC. It's no wonder why she's supporting this bill. It is corruption. Legalized bribes make for bought senators. That's why you have a bailout caucus. We got to vote them out, man. We got to get rid of them. Vote out the corporate Democrats. Vote them all out. All the names that are on this bill. And I will post them in the links to in the description of this video. All these people got to go. And a lot of them, thankfully, have challengers. Primaries matter. If you are sick and tired of the corporate Democrats teaming up with the Republicans to make it to help their rich friends, vote for progressives. Primaries, man, they're more important than general elections. So get out there, get registered. Voting is happening in Texas today. Get out there and vote. It's the only way to stop these assholes. Okay. One more story here. I'm going to leave you on a good note. Leave you on a high note here. especially if you live in Washington. Now, following the repeal of net neutrality protections by the FCC, a lot of states have signaled their can't think of that word now. Let me start that over again. Now, following the repeal of net neutrality protections by the FCC back in December, a lot of states have signaled their intention to institute their own forms of net neutrality in the states. It is their way of course, fighting back against the FCC under Agit Pi. Now, Washington has just become the first state to set up and pass its net neutrality requirements. Now, Governor Jay Inslee, who just signed this into law, said that, quote, "We know that when D.C. fails to act, Washington state has to do so. We know how important this is." Now, net neutrality is incredibly important. In fact, it's been shown that small businesses actually thrive when it comes to net neutrality rules, when we actually have those rules in place. Now, these rules, in case you need a reminder, are meant to prevent broadband companies such as Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon, who lobbied vociferously to be able to remove these net neutrality protections, to roll them back, from gaining more control over what people see and watch on the internet. Now, the regulations also prohibited providers from favoring some certain sites and apps over other sites and apps. Now, the new law in Washington requires internet providers to disclose information about their management practices, performance, and commercial terms. Violations would be enforceable under the state's Consumer Protection Act, and it would also stop state agencies from buying internet service from any company that blocks or prioritizes specific content or apps starting in 2019. Now, the net neutrality repeal goes into effect in spring. That's, of course, unless Congress gets together and does a Congressional Review Act. Now, Washington isn't the only state. It's the first state. But there are other states that are looking into this as well. Governors in 5 states, Hawaii, New Jersey, New York, Montana, and Vermont, have signed executive orders related to net neutrality issues, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Montana's order, for example, bars telecommunications companies from receiving state contracts if they interfere with internet traffic or favor higher-paying sites or apps. Now, of course, the telecommunications industry, they are not happy. Their lobbyists are not happy. And a lot of Republicans in Congress are not happy. Now, they say that net neutrality rules could undermine investment in broadband and introduce uncertainty about what are acceptable business practices. Well, you know what's unacceptable? Blocking and throttling content, favoring your apps and your sites over competitors' apps. That is unacceptable. I think they should know that by now. That's the reason that a majority of Americans actually believe in net neutrality rules and support net neutrality rules. You have over 80%, you have 75% of Republican voters that are like, yes, we believe in free speech on the internet. We believe that all speech should be created or treated equally on the internet. Yeah, Republicans. Now, why aren't your representatives representing you, Republicans? Oh, that's right, because they represent big business and corporations. Anyway, now, they also, net neutrality advocates say the FCC decision harms innovation and makes it harder for the government to crack down on internet providers who act against consumer interests. Now, look, a lot of the arguments against net neutrality are like, well, but wait, we didn't need net neutrality before Obama came in and wrecked the internet. No, the whole point of passing net neutrality rules is because companies were abusing the principle of net neutrality in the first place. Now, when the internet was created and started going mainstream, there was a universal agreement in place that the government would not come in and overregulate the internet, and the companies would not try to go in and unfairly screw over their customers. Now, corporations decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to break that agreement. And let me give you some examples of how they broke those agreements. In 2005, Madison River Communications was blocking voice over IP services. Now, the FCC ended up having to take to put a stop to it. In 2005, Comcast was also denying access to P2P servers without notifying customers. In 2007, AT&T censored Pearl Jam because they had the audacity to criticize President Bush. Now, in 2007, AT&T also was having Skype and other voice over IP programs blocked because they didn't like that there was competition for their cell phones. Again, they stood to personally profit. In 2010, Windstream Communications, which is a DSL provider, started hijacking search results made from using a Google toolbar and would consistently redirect users to Windstream's search engine and results. In 2011, Metro PCS tried to block all streaming content except for YouTube. And they ended up suing the FCC over that decision when the FCC went to block it. Not only that, but in 2011 through 2013, AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon had blocked access to Google Wallet. Now, this happened literally months after they were all busted collaborating with Google to block apps from the Android marketplace. So, there's more. In 2012, Verizon had demanded Google block tethering apps on Android devices because it would let owners avoid their $20 tethering fee. Now, this is despite them saying, oh, no, we won't do that. Oh, really? You wouldn't do that? Well, you said you didn't do that. You wouldn't do that, but it looks like you went and did it anyway. Now, a lot of these companies that are like, we promise we're not going to block or throttle if you remove net neutrality, are the same companies that would block and throttle, that promised not to block and throttle before net neutrality rules, and had done so anyway. In fact, Verizon was fined $1.25 million over blocking these tethering apps on Android. There's more. In 2012, AT&T tried to block access to FaceTime unless customers paid more money. In 2014, AT&T also announced a new sponsored data scheme offering content creators a way to buy their way around data caps that AT&T imposes on its subscribers. Not only that, but Netflix had to start paying Verizon and Comcast to, quote, improve streaming service for consumers. Basically, what that was a ransom. That's why Netflix was on the side of net neutrality. It was like, hey, man, look, I don't want to pay this damn ransom to you guys just to make sure you don't slow down my app. Now, T-Mobile was also accused of using data caps to manipulate online competition. And that's just some of the cases. This is why we need net neutrality. This is why promises that these ISPs make are complete and utter bullshit. But Ron Main, who's the executive director of the Broadband Communications Association of Washington, which opposed the bill, said cable companies his group represents have already pledged not to block legal content or engage in paid prioritization. But again, the problem is that your companies were already caught doing paid prioritization and doing data caps and blocking access to sites that are not their own. That is why we need net neutrality. We're not going to believe in this bullshit that you have. No, we need net neutrality rules. We need them back. Because, look, as soon as those rules are gone, come springtime, it's open season on us again. And we're not having it. Now, this is a great move by Washington. Look, even though right now we seem to have lost in the federal level, yes, we need one more senator to get on board with the Congressional Review Act. We got less than 60 days in order to reverse the decision by the FCC. If we can't get that done, at least we can get stuff done in the states. And that's where we can actually have an impact and actually do something to be able to have some measure of net neutrality rules. Now, this is going to be challenged in the courts, of course, because the FCC says, well, we're going to put in a law into this repeal that will that will preempt you from creating these laws. But there is a chance that the FCC doesn't actually have the authority to do that. All that's going to be settled once the lawsuits start flying. And believe me, they are coming. So that is good news for now. And look, all this goes to show you that even though we lost the battle, we have not lost the war, and that war continues to rage on. And we're going to continue to fight until we ensure that all content is treated equally on the internet and that nobody is blocked or throttled. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. If you haven't already, please hit the like button and share as well. If you haven't also, please subscribe. And you can support our channel by going to patreon.com/TYTNation. If you want to support us, wonderful, excellent. We could always use your support. And thank you for people who do support us for keeping us independent and non-corporate sponsored. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to have Ron Placone on the show. That'll be fun. We'll be talking about more corruption. Yay, in the Democratic Party. So you're not going to want to miss that. Till then, remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.